Good evening and welcome to this week's episode of Sunday Night Live, your favorite automotive show where we talk about all the issues that affect the customer experience at your store. Because the better the experience they have, the more they come back to you for everything they need when they need it. And they'll bring all their friends, their family members, their coworkers, basically in their entire online world. And today we have a two-part segment. The first part is our monthly fixed ops retention strategies. We have Mike Vogel, Joe Clementi, and Robert Sebestyen is having some buffering issues. He may or may not join us. We'll see what happens as the evening progresses. And we have the ever so lovely Jennifer Sanford with the Sanford Marketing Group that'll be joining us. Well, she is joining us. She's here. But the second half of the show will be the marketing segment. So I'm very excited. I've got a great circle of friends and connections, and they are ready to share with the world. So welcome, everyone. And why don't you let everyone know a little bit about who you are, what you do, and what brought you to this place, and then we'll jump right in.
So good evening, everybody. My name is Mike Vogel, and some of you may know me as a fixed ops coach. I've got 40 years in the automotive business, with 30 plus years as a service manager, service director, fixed ops director. Love everything all about fixed ops, and I have a great deal of passion, and that's why I'm here tonight.
Yay.
Go ahead, Jennifer.
Me go. All right. I'm Jennifer Sanford, and I've been in automotive not quite as long, only about 14 years. Primarily on the vendor side, working with SaaS companies. And my mission is to help those companies do a better job communicating and partnering with dealers.
Jen and I worked together at Dominion Dealer Solutions. So we attended a lot of functions together. We had a lot of fun and learned a lot of stuff.
Absolutely.
And I guess I'll go last, right? My name is Joe Clementi, known as Coach Joe. I'm a leadership performance coach, but also a vice president of service operations for the nation's largest provider of wheelchair accessible vehicles and adaptive equipment, with emphasis on fixed operations. And I'm excited to be here as always. I love the topics we talk about, and the group of people we always get to join in these discussions are always inspiring.
Excellent. Well, welcome to the show. And like I said, Robert may or may not be joining us, depending on if he resolves his Wi-Fi issues. So, retention. Everybody talks about it. It's that R word. But not everybody has a plan for it. And it's no secret that 7 in 10 customers leave the dealership service department and go to those guys and gals in the aftermarket. And that's usually at the first point of defection. And that first point of defection typically is the tires. And what's interesting is that not everybody looks at tires quite the same way. I walked into a store, not that long ago, and my question is always, hey, how's your tire business? And this gentleman looked me in the eye with a serious face and he said, we don't really worry about tires because there's only 10% margin in tires. I was flabbergasted. I said, it's not the 10% that we care about. It's the 100% we lose by not selling tires. So we can't afford not to. Mike, what have you seen out there in the tire world?
Just what you're talking about. I think we're in a dangerous area right now at the dealership level. And what I'd like to compare it to is how things were back in the late 80s, early 90s, when we didn't do a great job with oil changes. And we sat there and we charged too much for it. We took too long to get them done. And we kind of, for lack of a better expression, we treated oil changes like a second-class citizen. And what happened? We created the Jiffy Lubes, the Pep Boys, and all the other aftermarket vendors that are out there that have grown and grown and grown over the last few decades. And the tire business, we're already behind the 8 ball because there's so many big tire distributors throughout the country that do a really good job taking care of the customer when it comes to tires. But you hit the nail on the head, I think, when you talk about when you talked about the profit margin and they're not being serious about it, and you can't always chase the numbers up front. And when you don't put the customer experience first, you're always going to be chasing the tail like a dog. So, and when you talk about losing them from the tire sale, what about those next 2 visits and the 2 visits after that and the 2 visits after that? And what about the next vehicle sale? I mean, there's so much lost gross opportunity when you don't focus on the tires. So make $10 a tire on it, or $5 a tire, or $1 a tire. It doesn't really matter. You got to look big picture, long term, which is future RO count, future RO growth, and future car sales.
When the tire comes off, the brakes. And the aftermarket does a really, really good job with with tires because they see that as a larger opportunity, right? I remember when I used to run my Meijer shops, I would see the sticker in the window, and I would, if they had a service that was coming up or a service they just did, it didn't really matter. If it was coming up, hey, I see you're coming up for a service soon. For the same reason you come to us for all these specialty items, we do factory maintenance. And they would just say, go ahead and do it. They wouldn't ask how much it was. They already trusted us. They were happy with what we did for them, and they just said, add it. And when the customer had just had it done, it's the same conversation, just in reverse. Hey, I see you just had your car service. It's unfortunate I didn't tell you about that. We did a factory service. But next time you're due, would you mind if I swapped out the ticket on your window with ours? And then we'll remind you when you're due for service. Would that work for you? Yeah, absolutely. So you're right, Mike. The precursor was definitely the oil changes, but now we're kind of playing catch up. On your end, Joe, what are you seeing?
Yeah, I think the point that Coach Mike made is relevant to your business, right? If we're just looking at profitability, there are a lot. Windshield wipers isn't profitable, right?
Right.
But you do it as a matter of convenience. And when you think about tires, as soon as the client leaves that store and you put them in the hands of someone else, that separate service facility now has a chance to attract and keep your client. They have the opportunity to do the minor maintenance repairs. And really, from a dealership world, all that client now has is a connection to warranty. Everything else will be done elsewhere, right? And so if we think about it just from a retention perspective, the goal of tires is a gateway of loyalty. It's the gateway of keeping your clients loyal to you and making it convenient. And listen, why do people go to Jiffy Lube? I mean, there's tons and tons of studies out there. The only reason they go to those quick lube places is convenience. It's speed. It's not pricing. It's not, they don't take any shorter length of time, right? In fact, in many cases, you're waiting in line behind 10 other people or 20 other people. So it's just about connecting with the client more than just looking at the revenue. And if you think about the revenue only, and that's what's driving your loyalty, your business, then of course you're going to be left just trying to scrape your way to the top of the mountain by just trying to capture or pick off that business that exists and not really building from the foundation up. And I think that's Paul and Mike. Jennifer probably agrees, but we talk about this so often. It's the culture of more than just revenue, the culture of your client, and the culture of your organization is going to drive that loyalty. And we can talk until we're blue. If a dealer doesn't buy into tires, if they're not really sold on tires this late in the business, perhaps there's more that they're overlooking, right? There's so many voids in their everyday business that they're just, hey, how do I make the most off of one client? And without units in operation, like Mike said, you keep that repair order count growing. This is the gateway to loyalty.
And the thing about it is, we talk about the multi-point inspection, and I've talked about on previous episodes about selling the green on those visits. It really needs to start on the very first visit. If we're not talking tires at the very first visit, and that's an opportunity to sell the green. We talk about the multi-point inspection with 30 some odd items on it, and 25 to 28, sometimes 30 are all green. Why aren't we talking about the great stuff at 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30? Now, when you get to 30, you're starting to get close to needing tires. And so now we've built that trust, and we've built the relationship with the customer at that point where they're trusting us to buy their tires from us. We need to do a great job once we get there. If not, what are we doing? And, some of the common complaints I hear over and over again in the industry, and I'm talking about specifically at car dealerships, is that we don't have enough older vehicles and high mileage cars in our shops. Well, guess what? If you don't keep them on the hook with tires, and maybe that sounds a little deceptive, hook, but if we don't do a good job on presenting tires to them and selling tires to them when they need them, how are we going to get to 100,000 miles? How are we going to get to the average car being 12 years old on the road today? Geez, come on. It's a no-brainer. It really is. Like Joe said, it's kind of frustrating that we talk about this over and over again, but for some reason we can't get enough dealerships on board with being in the tire business.
That's the most important statistic you just said, right? If your repair order count is most of your repair orders are low mileage vehicles, then you haven't built a foundation of your current client base, right? You sent them to Johnny's garage to get the tires and the brakes, and they're only coming back to your store for warranty. What's the value to the client?
Back in 2014, I was running what I felt was a successful service operation, and even back then, the average vehicle coming in my service drive was 75,000 miles. So we hadn't even, and in the Toyota world, there's really no repairs till after 100,000 miles. It's really nothing more than a lot of maintenance. So cars need alignments. I know other parts of the country must have rough roads. California used to have good roads, and they're horrible now. I'm sure, Joe, you can attest to that. I mean, they're horrible. So you need a wheel balance once a year. You need an alignment once a year. I don't see shops doing that. I'm talking about dealerships, obviously.
Well, here's the thing.
Harken back. My first month on the job when I first joined Automotive, this is a long time ago. A guy named Bruce O'Brien took me under his wing and took me on a week-long tour. My very first week, really sitting down. I mean, I had been working with dealerships in a different kind of business, selling advertising, but in this space, I will never forget one of the first things a fixed ops guy told me. He said, as the tires go, so goes the customer. And I'll never forget that. He made it a mission to sell tires because that was his mantra. As the tires go, so goes the customer. If he didn't get them with those, he wouldn't keep them.
We have this perception in the car business that everybody's always price focused. It's not, right? The customer wants convenience and they're willing to pay for it. I was I was out to lunch one day, as sometimes I go, and I overheard this young lady she was saying that, she was going in to have her car serviced and she didn't want to go to dealership. And I said, well, everything takes longer. And this is what she had to say. There's nothing in automotive that doesn't take a long time at all.
That's actually not true. I just had an experience where I was at a quick lube oil change and it only took me 15 minutes. I didn't even have to get out of my car. So I spent a little extra money for the convenience factor, and I would do it time and time again.
So it's not the money, it's the convenience. And to Mike's point, to talk about tires at the first visit, I say rewind the tape even further than that. The tire conversation is one that needs to be had first on the website, because if they come to you, they're going to come to your website first, usually. Then the next time that conversation needs to happen is when the salesperson is selling the car, okay? When they're selling the car and they're doing the service walk, hey, it's great that you're considering buying a car from us, but here's why we'd like you to service with us also. They introduce them to a service professional who then gives them what I refer to as the tire walk, okay? Tires are gradual wear items. And when you come to us for service, every time you come in, we're going to check the tires for you. And here's how I make it relatable to them. Have any of you ever gone to a high school reunion and looked at some of the people and said, oh my God, I hope I don't look like that to other people? Has that ever happened to any of you? It's happened to all of you. And tires are no different. And what I mean by that is that it's a gradual wear item. When the tires are in good shape, they feel fine. When the tires are worn out, they feel fine unless they're worn out and now you're on snow or you're hydroplaning on water. They feel the same. It's just like that person you see. It's such a gradual change. On the outside, I'm 62. On the inside, I'm 12. And my wife will concur. So
I agree too.
You make it relatable to them, right? Every time you come in, we're going to check the tires for you. And here's why. You have on the floor of your shop, you have a green stripe painted, you have an amber stripe or orange stripe painted, and you have a red stripe painted. The red stripe signifies 10 car lengths or 32 feet, whatever that measurement is. And you say to the customer, here, come with me. You walk, you count every step, 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way to 32. You stop, you look at them, you look back where you started, you look at them, and you say 32 feet from where we're standing right now to where we started from. That's how much longer it's going to take you to stop when you need tires. And that's if you're not distracted. You've never seen anybody go down the highway like this, have you? And that's never been you, right? It's been everybody, right?
You know, one of the things that I've started doing in some of my training is kind of putting the fear factor into service managers and service advisors. Matter of fact, I just had this conversation on Friday at a dealership. I tell a service advisor, imagine if you have 20 customers this past month that didn't purchase tires, that needed tires from you. Do you realize approximately 14 of them are never coming back? I said, can you afford that? Are you willing to give up 14 customers just because you don't want to present tires or make the compelling argument why buy tires from me? And then you flip it over to the service manager and the parts manager and say, this is what it's going to cost you. So if you've got 100 customers that needed tires that month and they weren't sold the tires, and so 70 go away. So take 70 customers that month times 2 visits a year. That's 140 repair orders gone. Times 12 months. Now you're talking about 1,200 repair orders gone.
It's stupid money.
Who can give away that much business? Tell me what business would be okay giving away 70, 75% of their customers?
None.
But we sit here month in and month out, year in and year out, and we accept it. And it's just, it's not acceptable. And now, I mean, we've talked about it on previous shows, but we've got the EVs, coming on. It's going to be gradual. It might take another 10, 15, 20 years to get there. But if we don't get great at selling tires now, we're going to be in a world of hurt in the future when we're seeing even 50% EVs with no maintenance.
So
Now,
I love your suggestion on how to sell it. Another way to approach it. Are there any other suggestions on different ways to approach that with a client?
There's one more I'd like to add. Okay. If we have the conversation with every MPI when they come in, we'll know 6 months in advance when they're going to be due for tires, because we've measured them along the way. We know it took this long for them to wear to this point. By the time October comes, you're probably going to need tires. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to proactively, I'm going to create an opcode in the DMS that I'm going to call October tires. And I'm going to attach that opcode to that repair order. And in September, I'm going to say, hey, listen, we estimate you're probably going to need tires in October. We'd like you to pop in September so we can take a peek. I'd rather have you plan for it in advance than have something happen. So if it's okay with you, I'm gonna reach out to you in September to remind you. You put that in. Come September, you run your decline service codes, but this time you run it for October tires, and you'll have a database of everybody that needs tires that month in the month of October, where you can pick up the phone. Hey, it's Paul at XYZ Motors. I'm just calling to remind you. Remember we spoke about tires. I'd like you to pop in. I'm not saying 100% of the people are going to pop in, but guess what? Most of them will, because all along the way, you've already told them 6-7 times that their tires are in good shape. You explain to them what the rationale is behind us checking them for them, and now they trust you. It's just a question of them waiting for your phone call to come on in. It's not a surprise.
Yeah,
You have to set up a set. You have to set up a set program. So what I did from probably, I want to say 2008 and on, when it comes to tires, first of all, I offered a 30-day price guarantee. Second thing I did besides the price guarantee was I offered complimentary tire rotations if you purchase 4 tires. And the reason why I did that is, how much is a customer worth to you to see them every 5,000 miles? Am I willing to pay my technicians $5 or $6 to pull the wheels on a car? And the customer most likely is going to have an oil change or other maintenance done. And then there's other things that could be found during the multi-point inspection. And the last thing is, if the manufacturer doesn't have road hazard warranty, include the road hazard warranty on it. Do the complimentary tire repairs when necessary. Replace the tire when necessary. The goodwill that's generated on that and the value that goes into that program will take your tire program to levels that you haven't seen ever. I mean, I took a store that was 58th in the region in tire sales, and they were 5th within 12 months. I mean, that's a huge jump. How many customers did we retain? So we saw increase in RO growth 10 to 15 to 20% year over year, because we're retaining more customers, because we're doing a good job with presentation of tires. You got to be serious about the business. And as we've all brought up at the beginning, is there's no gross in it. It's not sexy to sell tires, but it's necessary. It's 100% necessary.
It's to avoid loss.
Changed in that, right? In that context, Mike, was that you provided the value of connecting with the client to build loyalty, right?
Correct.
And so when there's a larger connection, Stephen's comment that you just had up there a little bit earlier was right on point. The business is fragmented. The front end sees only a sale, and the back end is supposed to retain and keep people. Well, the reality is that the metrics are showing that we're not doing a really good job of retaining. And the reason why is because it is fragmented, because we see a dollar. And when we change that dollar, to Mike's point, which is look at the reoccurring revenue, but the reoccurring visits from your clients where you have another connection, because the sale itself goes from transactional to more loyal based to more, hey, I trust Mike, and what I'm going to do is take everything that I need related to my car to Mike. Even if my switch doesn't work, I don't even know what it is. Everything. Hey, Mike, fix my switch, right? That's the thing that Mike created in that environment was, hey, here's a better connection to your clients. The revenue itself will come. It's a byproduct.
Terry has a good question here. Does selling tire and wheel policy help enhance retention? Secondly, is there an easy way to provide that product to the customer? Yeah, absolutely. It helps in retention because it ties to people to coming in. But the only problem is it only ties them when there's an issue, right? The tire and wheel, typically, if somebody smacks a curb or something like that, it doesn't hurt. But the proactive conversation from the minute one all the way through every time they come in for service, I think that will help better. As far as an easy way to sell that product, it's a question of educating the salesperson to have a conversation where they can find out from the customer if that particular product would add value based on their history.
The problem with tire and wheel, right, is it's been bastardized. It's a front end product, and the goal was how to make money off the client. It wasn't just to protect the client and give them an option. It was how do we make more money in a different area of the client. And so I don't know, Mike, if this is still the case, but I know in California for a long time, you couldn't sell that product anymore because the dealer body just abused it. And so when it comes back to that environment, tire and wheel is perceived as a negative, frankly. It's a revenue only generation. That's
Scott Ria put on there about, unfortunately, technicians and advisors don't want to sell tires, but that's a byproduct of, sorry to say this, weak leadership, weak service managers.
You're right.
Okay, if you're not going to hold your team accountable, and to Scott's point with the MPI tires red, it has to start with green, transition to yellow, and going to red. And where it has to happen is on the service drive with the customer present. Whether you use a product like what Scott's company offers from Traction, or if you're doing, sticking tires the old-fashioned way with the customer present. The whole idea is it needs to be done on the drive with the car there, with the customer there. That's the
100%.
most effective way. And talking about it from the very beginning, from when the tires are green, as they transition to yellow and red, just like we should be doing with brakes, just like we should be doing with engine air filters and cabin air filters. I mean, it's no different. But it starts at the top. If the service manager isn't willing to step up their game and teach their people the right way, and then hold them accountable, how are we going to get better?
Right. And Steve's got a good point here. Reach out to the customer, have a conversation with them. We're not doing that enough, right? We're just not. We're waiting for them to come in. And, to the point about the tire conversation and selling the green, a lot of stores don't do that. My friend who bought a vehicle at the dealership services with them exclusively. Okay. We were going to dinner the other night, and he tells me how he bought tires at Pepwise. I asked him, I said, Alex, why didn't you buy the tires at the dealer? And he looked at me, he said, my dealer doesn't do tires. I was flabbergasted. I said, no, your dealer just doesn't do a good job telling you need tires. Mm-hmm. And then the other funny thing that happened was his car broke down. It went into limp mode. He had to tow it to the dealership. Okay. And the next day he gets an $1,100 estimate from the dealer about differential flush, all kinds of things. None of it that had anything to do with the car going into limp mode. I'm still not quite sure. It sounds like they put a can of injector cleaner in the gas tank, and maybe that fixed it, and they added another $1,000 or $1,100 worth of stuff on top of that. They're clearly not selling the green.
And they're not talking about the rim process. They're not talking about what does the car need fixed that's related to what the car came in for.
Bim, bang.
And then what they're talking about first is maintenance type items, that's graving, or there's a spiff on it, anything that's going to be beneficial. It's easy for them to do, and it's probably got a spiff. So guess what? That's what they're going to recommend first. And that's where we get into danger. Yep. Selling the green and the rim process is the proper way to do it on every single visit.
Hey, I just want to give a special shout out to Lane Lantas. He's one of the general managers that I do training with. I think this is his first time tuning in. Lane, thanks for tuning in, man. He says, get into tire storage. They will always come back. Brilliant. Oh, before we go too much further, Jen, Mike, and Coach Joe, are you guys okay if we go a little over this evening?
Sure.
Jen? Okay, because we got a couple more minutes to go on the tire piece of it, and then we'll jump into the marketing piece of it. So sorry, folks, for going over late. What was I thinking? That we could cover all this stuff in 60 minutes.
And Robert's not even here.
And Robert's not even, oh my God, it would have been like 2 hours. Let's see here. Sergio says training advisors was always a challenge, but start off by selling the green. There's so much value in that.
The problem remains, how do we get enough service managers engaged to do things the right way? And as long as, Scott talked about it again right there, as long as we're talking about, effective labor rate and gross profit percentages being hounded on, we can't get there with tires. It's just not possible.
If you're pointed only at money, at revenue, and that's the only driver, that's where all the attention will go. Money. Right. How much money are we making? And then the long-term disconnect with the client is they become your cash register instead of a connection to your business. And then they go elsewhere where there's relationships, where there is, trust is built. They don't feel like, hey, I'm just coming into my dealer and, well, how much are they going to try and make off me now? Right. That's the
1,100.
Yeah.
And tires are a big ticket item. So if you haven't taken the time to build a relationship with a customer, it's a difficult conversation to have.
And I like Steven's comment. He said something about service managers are not retention managers. They are retention managers are, relational, not technical.
Right. 100%. Maybe that's why I was successful, because I'm definitely not technical.
I would definitely buy tires for you, Mike. So these are, what we're talking about here is we're not splitting atoms, or we're not reinventing the wheel. There are basic, simple processes. Go into your service drive tomorrow and open the door, and you'll see in a lot of places there's about a 6-figure paperweight that sits at the front of the drive. It's that machine that's supposed to measure the tire tread depth. It's supposed to measure the alignment, but it only does you good is if your people use it 100% of the time. If you've got a big screen overhead where the customer can see their name, the colors, green, orange, red, so they start asking questions, and you introduce that with the printout right away, and you sell the safety and you sell the green and why they're there.
But that's an accountability issue.
Right.
Technology is not a crutch for poor service. Right. Technology will not do the job for them. So whether you have that technology on your drive or you pull out what you just pulled out, Paul, to measure the tires, either way will work. It's a matter of who is making sure that it's being done on a consistent basis with every customer.
Yeah, and I would think that the stores that aren't doing it, that are not in tires, I like Mike's point. It becomes a leadership discussion, right? It's where is the focus, and there shouldn't be this fraction of perception from the service drive, right? It should be about how do we retain and keep our clients that are loyal to us, and they will spend money. The how-to, there's plenty of information out there to how. It's the really why. You have to define why. What's the culture going to be like? And if it's, again, predominantly driven just by revenue, it's no wonder those stores aren't going to do tires, right, Mike? And Mike can give you all the tools necessary, but if you don't buy it, then, and you're only looking at the money, then there is no cause and effect. It's a culture issue.
Jackie B. Cooper said it best. I had the audio cassette tapes. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And that's the trust piece of it. Oh, what was that noise?
That was me. Sorry. I kicked it.
All right. So a lot about tires. All of us on the screen here know a little thing or two about tires. So by all means, if you're struggling with a process, reach out to any one of us. We'll be happy to take the call and guide you through a process that works because we've done it.
I loved your ideas, Paul. You had some really good ones.
Well, thank you. I thought so. Just kidding. All right, Jen, I want to congratulate you, first of all. You've started your own venture. It's nothing new to you because you've been doing it for a long time. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Thanks, Paul. I started Sanford Marketing Group in September, and the idea is to support vendors to become better partners and to elevate their overall communication. And the customers I'm working with already have good marketing. They already have some great things in place. They just want to elevate what they're doing, improve the consistency of it. And sometimes they literally just need a strong second pair of hands that can come in and help them execute, or to sit on the front end with them and plan, hey, what do we want to do here? What do we want to do there? So that's what I'm there for. I'm really delighted that it's not been too long and I'm working with some terrific people. And it's fun to go to the events in the fall as well and run into old friends and new.
Well, it's funny. I'm in a lot of stores, and I've been in a lot of stores. This is my 44th year in automotive. And, I've gone into stores where they have an agency that they work with that handles a lot of their stuff. And I've gone into a lot of other stores that don't have an agency. They rely on somebody in store to take care of certain aspects of their business. Oftentimes it's fragmented. There's a different person that has a different speciality, so to speak, or knows a guy or knows a gal. I mean, how does a dealership decide when should they hire an agency, or are they doing fine on their own?
That's a really, really great question, Paul. And I've worked with agencies both I used to sell advertising, and I've worked with them as a client. And I've worked with all kinds of agencies. And I think it really depends as you're looking through your plans, what are your objectives for the year? And are you going to be able to accomplish them with what you have going on? Do you have a specific need? Do you need to create an affinity website for a special project, or do you need to completely revamp your OEM approved website process? Or do you need a different SEM vendor? So to achieve the goals, you may need technical support that is not available in-house. And that's when you need to consider hiring an agency, a third party.
Now, how do you know, who's the right agency? Do you interview them, or how does one know if they haven't done this before?
Well, that's the nice thing about automotive, is that there are a lot of different really talented vendors out there, that many are OEM compliant or co-op engaged. And I recommend you look at all of those, but have a template that you grade them by. So you can issue an RFP, but it's also really wise to have a little like a template you might use when you're hiring a staff member. What's important to you? What are the ultimate objectives? How are they going to get the job done? Can you see examples of their work? What's their pricing structure? So really be quite objective about it. So as you evaluate these guys, you can find out if they're going to be a good fit for you, not only on how they do their job, but how they relate to you. We were just talking about relationships, right? It's the same thing with agencies.
Well, then, based on what you just said, then I think it would behoove any dealership to at least proactively reach out to someone in an agency capacity, perhaps someone such as yourself, because you know what questions to ask. When you tie it to what I'm looking for in an employee, okay, that makes it really interesting. Having done some hiring and retention workshops, what I'm finding is that there are a lot of stores that don't have such a plan as to specifically what they're looking for in an employee. So they can't really relate the agency model to what they're using in seeking an employee, if a lot of them aren't seeking that or don't have that written policy to seek that out in an employee.
That's a really interesting point. And I've hired a lot of people. I've hired a lot of agencies. I always try to start with the end in mind, and having a job description is the best way to do that. And with an agency, it's the same kind of thing. What's the job that needs to get done? And what are the responsibilities, and what are the qualifications? Exact same thing. So a good job description, and then measuring a little template, a little Excel. I mean, I've got an Excel document for everything. I love Excel. Oh, I don't know what I do without it. Anyhow, it's a great way to just check off all the different things that you need on that requirements and qualifications.
Now, some of the things that our dealers spend money on are things like SEM, video. Video is very popular. I always ask my dealers, that aren't doing video, I say, do you guys or gals watch any online videos? And everybody does. I'm not going to lie. I probably spend a couple hours a day watching more videos than I should. Some of them educational, some of them cat videos. I'm just being straight out there.
Probably
right?
yarn videos for you.
And yarn videos as well, because we create them. But I hate to watch my own videos because that's kind of creepy. But so, do you hire the same agency to handle your SEM as you do with video, or do you look for specialists?
So that's another great question, Paul. Thank you. So what I found out is that agencies are much like people. They're really good at some things and not good at everything. So you're not going to hire a sales rep and then expect that sales rep to also do your accounting work. With SEM specifically, there are OEM compliant agencies, and there are some really, really good ones in our industry. So I would encourage you to look at those. But guess what? They're not usually going to be next door. They're going to be somewhere else. They're not going to be in your backyard. And for really well-produced video, you need somebody local. You need to hire somebody who knows what they're doing. Maybe it's a friend. Maybe it's somebody you happen to know who's good at it. But you really need to hire somebody local to come in, do that work with you. So again, hire your agency based on what you expect from them.
So on the SEM side of things, they could do that pretty much from across the world.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I do a lot of video content creation, and you're right. It's people ask me where do you go anywhere? Well, with video, it's kind of difficult because you have to be in the area, right? Video takes an inordinate amount of time. You might spend several hours underlined to create an engaging video to deliver specific messaging for your client.
Yeah.
Okay. That only ends up being 90 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes. It's crazy. People have no idea how long video takes. The editing piece of it's crazy. And sometimes I do testimonial videos for restaurants, and they'll supply me with 4 couples, and everything looks okay, decent when you shoot it. But then when you get it back into the editor, 3 of the 4 couples aren't going to make the grade. You have to shoot so much more in order to get a quality production that you want to convey the right messaging. So I agree with you 100% about the video person being a local person, because it just takes too much time. And if you hire somebody from across the way, you're going to spend a lot of money, a lot more than just finding a good quality local person.
Absolutely.
So what are some of the tips that you would have in dealers aligning themselves with the right agency partner?
Well, there's going to be a lot of needs at an agency that's growing, and you work with the community, you work with your customers. You've got very, very important digital needs, but you probably also have very traditional media needs as well. I do encourage you to look at our wonderful industry of agencies that do a number of different things very, very, very well. But there are going to be times when you're probably going to need somebody else to look in and do the local work with you. So things you want to think about is when you go through that RFP process is, one, make sure your end result is clear, what you want to achieve, that you set up guideposts along the way so that you can measure what's actually getting done along the way, whether it's a project or it's just like SEM, it's just a constant evolution it's never done. It's just always in motion. Yeah. They should have a really good dashboard for you to look at and measure back with your analytics. So make sure you check in with them regularly. And then really go over the pricing in advance. Most agencies, if there's money being spent for advertising that's involved, you want to make sure you understand what's getting spent on advertising versus what are fees. And most fees these days are either flat or a 15 to 20% commission. You can negotiate those, but understand exactly what's being spent on your advertising versus the other fees, because that has been a tricky area that agencies have tried to mess around with. None of the really good OEM approved and co-opt agencies that we have in automotive, I've not seen that from them, but I can't say that about everybody.
Hey, Sean Armour says the panel is fire. Thank you, my friend. And Sergio says, Paul, you're exactly right. Not every dealer knows how to hire a professional advisor, and believe dealers are hiring people based on how many gross items they sold for the previous OEM. Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
Now, a question I have for you is marketing. Look, what we know today that works today may not work tomorrow. What worked yesterday may not work today, right? Marketing is a live animal that is continually morphing and growing in different areas.
Mm-hmm.
And, years ago, the big goal was television because everybody watched television. So dealers spent a lot of money to have ads on. Now, I'm not, some of it was for vanity reasons. I know a couple of dealers that are friends of mine particularly love seeing themselves on the big screen. That may or may not help the cause, right? A couple of them should not have been on the screen, but that's another story altogether. So that always changes. So now with everything going online, the cost of television has gone down dramatically, right? So there are all different mediums where you can deliver your messaging. Now, I'm a person that believes that you need to be in a lot of different areas with a consistent message that you're delivering, because not everybody lives in the same space. You need to know where your clients are because you're going to reach them in a specific area. Okay, so take, for instance, social media marketing, which is a dear love of mine. I spend a lot of time in that. I see sometimes people are crafting messaging, or they're focusing their entire attention on someone that's not even in their demographic of customers, right? And I'll give you for instance, if you're looking for an audience that's primarily in the 20s, under 30, TikTok is probably a good place to be because that's where those people live. If your customers are 30 to 60 to 70, I hate to say it, but Facebook is still pretty hot. That's a prime area where you want to be. So when I look up a particular OEM and I see their demographic is age 25 to 44, yet the store focuses 90% of their efforts on TikTok, they're ignoring a very large segment of their own customer base, right? So are there particular recommended mixes in media mix today? Like radio, for instance. People say, oh, radio's dead. Listen, I may not necessarily listen to AM radio, but guess what? There's a lot of people out there that do. You have to know your customer and you have to know where are they, and you need to be in that particular market for whatever percentage. But do you have any data that tells us what some of the better mixes are, or is that depending on dealer?
Well, I think that's on the B2C side. On the B2C side, it's really going to depend on the demographic and the region that you're in. There are so many different factors that are going to go into that. I'm a big believer in being offline and online, because the most touch points, especially in a B2C environment, you really need both to solidify that brand awareness and some level of brand trust. Granted, the trust piece of it isn't going to come into place until they meet you, but you want the value proposition to actually match. So you want whatever you're delivering offline, online to meet the dealership experience. And that's what we just spent half hour talking about, was that dealership experience in the service drive. No reason why you shouldn't be 100% focused on promoting your service. It's not just about the cars. We all know that.
Yeah.
So there's not a magic bullet there, but there are all kinds of wonderful means that you can take advantage of the B2C marketing mix for your market. And some of it's really watching and learning. What are other people doing and how are people responding? And then measuring. Marketing is all about the numbers.
And I want to add to a piece of that. We always saw print is dead, right? Anybody you talk to in marketing says print is dead. But guess what? When we opened our brick and mortar a year ago, we have some customers that aren't online. Some older customers that are not online that came in with a piece of paper that had our information on there that was in the newspaper, right? It's counterintuitive. From where I've been looking for many years, I thought that print was dead. But apparently it's not dead. It shouldn't be the largest part of your marketing effort, but you should at least, if you have some clients, you should at least reach out to them in those areas.
We're all, many buyers are business people. And so I do a lot of B2B work. And, we could go around the room and talk about which industry publications you enjoy reading. And there's probably one or two that stand out. And people are the same way in their personal lives. There's going to be things that they look at that are important to them, whether it's lifestyle or business oriented. Those are definitely great places to have your message.
You just need to know your audience.
Exactly.
So then how do you keep your agency on track? If you're not the expert in it, how do you make sure that you keep them on track?
In terms of keeping your agency on track, it's really just like I said before, to treat them like an employee. You set goals, you set guidelines, you meet with them, you make sure they're hitting every one of those widgets and meet those KPIs. The agency is going to be a little bit of a guide for you because you hired them to do a job that you either don't want to do or don't know how to do. Right. So you want them to advise you. And if they're not advising you, that also deserves a second look. They're supposed to be the experts in that. So trust but verify, that's where all those KPIs come in. Yeah. And that's any good relationship with it, whether it's an employee or an agency, trust but verify.
Well, the interesting part about this, I'm not going to say there's egos in the car business, because I wouldn't make such a claim. Mike, what do you think? Probably not, right? I know I'm going on the fringe here, but tied to that is a sense of self-awareness, right? How do you convey to a dealer that may not be as self-aware as one should be that they need an agency? And then furthermore, how do they know they're paying the right price?
On the right price, that really should come out a little bit in the RFP process. But again, take a look at what they're in the evaluation process. Really be very clear about that. What are you going to charge me for? What are the fees going to look like? Where are you spending? What are you going to spend on advertising versus fees and commissions? There are a lot of hidden fees that can jump out at you. If you need them to resize an ad, for example, are they going to charge you for that? Is there an overhead fee? What's your mix? And be very clear up front that you want to know what those things are. Any agency is got their own mix of how they do things, just like every dealership has a different mix of the way they do things. So it's just understanding how they do it and whether you can live with that.
Now, are customers sometimes somewhat unrealistic in their expectations on pricing? And let me add to that before you answer that. There's a lot of talk about pay for performance, but there's a lot of work that goes into marketing, right? There are people that will reach out to you and they'll put together some kind of cockamamie proposal in their head that, well, if you bring me X amount of customers, I'm happy to give you a percentage of, and things like that. I remember I was at a restaurant having dinner the other night, and this guy, he said, "What do you do?" I said, "Well, I do marketing." And he says, "Oh, that's great, because I need marketing." And he starts talking to me about you could create marketing for me, and then I'll give you a piece of everything that comes in. And I literally laughed in the guy's face, because it's like, no, you don't understand. I don't need to prove myself to you. I've got 560 million other people that already rely on my stuff to make decisions on where to go. So no, I don't think we're going to do one of these, you give me a vig on what you sell piece, because I know the amount of work that goes into working with people. Do agencies get hit with offers such as those?
Some agencies will offer you a price per performance or a payment for performance, and that's usually limited to specific activities and specific functions. You're not going to see that in the general realm, but there may be certain things they'll do for you that is strictly performance based. But that's as you said, that's really not normal, because you're being expected to look at the whole scheme, come up with value propositions, add content, and the whole 9 yards. So that's very hard to quantify.
Yeah, and all that. I mean, there's so much work to it. When you actually roll up your sleeves and you get involved with this kind of work, that's when you have a real sense of appreciation as to what these companies go through, because it's so much work.
It can be a lot. It is a lot of fun. So I enjoy the discovery, the research, the brainstorming. I love being able to work with a group of people to come up with the right idea. Usually the first idea is not the right idea, and you build and develop it. It's a ton of fun.
Now, there are sometimes those cases where, you start with an agency and things didn't quite work out the way we planned. So how does one break up with an agency? I mean, is it like a divorce, or how does that work?
Make sure you always have a 30-day out clause in your contracts, and make sure if you have to exercise that you're not responsible for future payments, that you're only responsible for payments up to the point of the relationship severing. That's a very important factor in your contract.
Now, did many changes in contract structure come about through COVID? Have you seen any of that?
I didn't. I didn't. I did a ton of digital all through COVID. I was really excited. I left Automotive briefly and went to work for a company that didn't believe in digital. And when COVID happened, woohoo, we got to do digital, because that was the only means of meeting the customer. Those billboards were not going to work. So I didn't see a lot of changes. What I did see were some people who were trying to say, hey, it's a flat rate. You pay me $5,000 for digital marketing. And I had to, this is one of my RFP examples where, well, how much of that is going to go to media? Well, we are going to cost balance that for you. I'm like, that's great. How much of that is going to go to the media? And it turns out they were going to charge me a 30% commission and only put 70% of that $5,000 in the media. So that was a no-go from the start. That's a very high commission rate. I want as much of my money as possible going into the media.
Well, that's interesting that you haven't seen a lot of changes on the contract side, because we've seen so many changes with COVID, right? The way companies do business. It's interesting. At least I find it interesting that there are some things that haven't really changed that much as a result of COVID.
I'd say advertising practices have changed, but not the contracts themselves.
Okay. Any other things you want to impart with?
No, I'm just really excited to be here, and I'm really excited that you invited me and to hang out with Mike and Joseph as well. That's been a lot of fun. Fixed ops was something I got to know a lot better when I was at Stella, because we were dealing with service phone calls. So that's something I feel is such a deep well of knowledge and information that I've just scratched the surface of it, but it's really fascinating. So thank you for letting me be a part of this.
Love fixed ops. It's right in my heart, as it is with Joe and Mike and Robert. And I'm sorry that Robert had technology issues this evening because he would have contributed a lot of great stuff.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure.
Mike, Joe, any last thoughts you wanna leave the audience with?
So, yeah, I'll leave real quickly. You talked about what changed in COVID and things that have come up. Now, when we talk about fixed ops, there's a lot more activity as far as pickup and delivery and mobile service. But as we have brought up before, why would you jump into something like that without even having everything running well in your department currently? It's just another avenue to go into. But if you're not going to be really great at it, and if you're not going to hold people accountable, and if you don't have a good process or a plan on how it's going to operate, don't jump in. Get your house in order, get everything running the way it should be as consistently as possible, and then you can explore, dipping your toes into the water and getting those things going. So I'm just amazed on how many people like to jump on the new flavor of the month without having their house in order. So that's my 2 cents.
Great point. Joe?
Yeah, I love that point, Mike, because it's really about foundation, right? And if you start with the right end in mind, the culture, and you build outward, then everyone can be a part of the success. Everyone can be a part of the vision. Everyone can see where you're going and work to achieve it. And if you're just driven on profit, it's a leadership problem. And perhaps you should find a leadership coach to help you make close the gap between what you're trying to create and where you are now. And then tie someone like Jennifer in to help you guide. Once you have it clearly defined and your vision very clear and concise and how you're going to approach it, then Jennifer can help you bring it all together and make the vision come real.
Wonderful. I want to thank you guys for contributing this evening. To anybody out there, either live or watching on the replay, if you're not connected, everybody's tagged in this post. So just click on the name and reach out to connect with that person. I know I personally have a policy of if I can help you or you can help me, there's a good reason for us to be connected. So I'm always looking for like-minded business professionals. Reach out to any of us, whether it's the tire conversation, the marketing conversation. We are all accessible, right? As my good friend Paul Machine always says, a rising tide lifts all boats. So we are all just a phone call away if you need any help whatsoever. So you guys stay on while we log off. I wish everyone is safe and successful next week, and we will see you next week on Sunday Night Live. Thanks.